Welcome to Forest Chat, where we talk about individual endeavour in Western Australia, what it takes, what it means, and how you do it. I'm your host, Paul Vandermeer, and in today's episode, we're talking with Karen Crutchlow about cycling to complete a personal challenge. Karen set herself a personal challenge to cycle from Busselton Jetty to Eucla and back in 2022, and she succeeded in doing that. Welcome to Forest Chat, Karen.
Hello, Paul.
Great to have you on the show, Karen. Karen, Busselton Jetty to Eucla. That's a fair old cycle. Can you tell me about the structure of doing that cycle?
It kind of fell into place once I'd put it out there that I was going to do it. It was 3,700 kilometers in total. And it was a massive endeavor because it was 6 weeks. So 6 weeks out of work, no pay, and all the rest of it. And the logistics, I had a friend who is a retired nurse who offered, she just volunteered, mad woman, to drive the camper van. And she helped me organize everything. And once I'd got her in place, it kind of just fell into place, the whole thing. People got to hear about it. People approached me and offered to do little things. A friend of mine, Tone, he did all the videoing and helped me with the marketing. So the actual moving off, although it was a huge thing to organize, actually flowed really well. And then once you're on the bike and you're doing the cycling, all you've got to think about is getting on the bike and getting to your destination each day.
That's the easy bit.
That's the easy bit. Yeah.
There was a structure around that. What was that driver that you had to go and do that?
So for a few years, I'd been wanting to set myself a challenge. So by the time I actually had done the ride, I'd been living with cancer for 17 years and really, really well. And I just wanted to show myself that I was able to, my body was really functioning well, I guess. It was to affirm the decisions I'd made and everything I'd put in place to maintain my own sense of well-being and my physical health. And despite the fact I was doing these things despite living with cancer. So it was a part of my life, but it wasn't something that dominated my life. Yeah, so that was my personal reason for doing the ride. And then at the same time, I'd been in business with a friend of mine who I'd met. She'd been diagnosed with a brain tumor back in 2013. And through my work, she'd come with her husband and children to a workshop I'd run. And I'd followed up after the workshop just to see how she was. And we just connected. And she ultimately became a business partner as a coach as well, a nutritional coach. So we'd been working together for some years. And then we were going to do this ride together. But so many things happened. And then she was re-diagnosed with a brain tumor. So she couldn't take part in the ride. And initially I dropped the idea, but I just felt it was important to do it. And I also wanted to give her something to be involved in as well. And so she was integral to the stories we were telling and the interviews we were doing. And although she'd had an operation by Charlie Teo, so I decided rather than it being a personal challenge for me and originally for Nina, my girlfriend, it became an awareness opportunity to raise awareness about the work of Charlie Teo, but predominantly his foundation, which is a brain cancer research foundation that he formed. The timing wasn't good because when I set off for the ride, he then found himself in front of a tribunal. And probably many of your listeners will recall that he wasn't actually interviewed, but they did a story on him on 60 Minutes. And so he was demonized on there. Everything they said on that 60 Minutes was very different to the experience that Nina had. And I was privy to a couple of the consults with him, with Nina and her husband. So I can say through personal experience that I didn't see any of what they were portraying on 60 Minutes occur with my girlfriend and indeed with other patients of his that live here in WA that I'd come to know through Nina. So it was a challenge we weren't expecting and conversations we weren't expecting to have, but we still managed to do it. And I can actually say that we had one difficult conversation on the whole trip around Charlie Teo. Everyone else we met had either experience of him via a family member or had known somebody in their community who'd had experience with Charlie Teo that was contrary to the 60-minute portrayal of him. So we were encouraged in many ways with that. And I ended up with a lot of names penned onto my high-vis vest on the back and the front. And I still have that as a memento of people that we met on the journey who wanted me to carry with me on the ride, I guess, if you like, the spirit of the person they've written on my back. So it was, I'm getting goosebumps right now just even thinking about all of that. But yeah, so it was an incredible experience. That's what I can say from start to finish.
It sounds like it. It sounds like even in amongst what was probably later in the journey was a bit controversial, maybe is the word to use, but in the getting ready for it, everything flowed,
Yeah.
which sounds like it was really meant to happen.
That's how I see it. And I see that with everything in life. If it's too much of a challenge, just let it go. If it becomes so arduous, just let it go. Yeah, I do believe that if things are meant to happen, then a way will be found to make it happen.
The doors will open at the right
Yeah.
times, and they don't always look like they're going to make it.
No. And people just come into your life at the right time. It's magical. It's great.
Yes. Now, you talked about a couple of other elements of the journey in that you had a bike,
Mhm.
and what sort of bike was it, and what sort of stuff did you carry?
So I used a Norco bike and it was a gravel bike. So not necessarily ideal for a road trip because obviously it doesn't have the slick, thin tires. But I was very conscious. I had no cycling experience before going on this bike, apart from dabbling, and I have to say it was dabbling in training. And prior to the actual me setting off, I chipped my elbow. I fell
Oh,
off trying to cross the train tracks on the jetty for a photo shoot. Wasn't a pretty sight.
lucky you didn't
So
go for a swim.
yeah, so things like that had happened beforehand, but it didn't stop me. So I had a Norco bike, and Fat Duck cycles were massive in just helping me work out what equipment I needed, making sure I had spares of what I needed. They were on the end of a phone or text message anytime I needed them. They made sure that I had the right clothing. Another company, Connell Cycling Gear from Dunsborough, they contacted me and provided me with 2 or 3 sets of everything I needed. And I have to say, the cycling shorts they do are incredible. I did not have a sore backside the entire trip, and I was doing 100 Ks a day. So
100 k's a day is a good effort.
yeah, I mean, I'd have a day off a week, which was we hung out for that day off a week, got out the sparkling water. But yeah, just I guess also the process of me just setting up the ability to do the bike ride, I became aware of some amazing businesses that are around in our local community that are doing incredible things and providing incredible products. So I was very, very lucky. And then Hilsey's came on board to help me with the marketing because, of course, they've got a store down in Albany, and I was going. My trip out to Eucla went along the coast through Denmark, Pemberton, Denmark, Walpole, or the other way around, and then on down to Albany and then out to Esperance. And so there were touch points where they really helped me as well, just to keep the journey in the public realm, if you like. And they run a little competition, and yeah, just amazing how people just came out and and also I'm not good at asking for help. So for people to reach out to me was massive. It really humbled me actually.
They obviously saw good in what you were trying to do.
Yeah. And Nina, my girlfriend, is very well known. And like she did a lot of fundraising before she had the surgery with Charlie Teo, which has resulted in her having a lot of physical limitations. And she's still doing rehab now. And so she was well known because she's just such an amazing kind of breath of fresh air. And so people knew Nina's story as well. And that's why they reached out to me because of the link between what I was doing and yeah, and the experience of doing the bike ride. It was an experience. Yeah.
I'll bet. Having driven across the Nullarbor and seen people on their bikes on the way across, and we're sitting there in the relative comfort of our car, just going zhoop along the highway, and
Yeah.
then seeing people and going, they look like they're with the people who are like another kilometre or two further back and all that sort of stuff. But you were obviously on your own, but you had a
Yeah.
camper van following you, is that right?
Yeah, and even that, they sponsored us. They gave us a massive, massive discount on using the camper van for the 6 weeks. So Susan was driving it. So the strategy we used was I'd set off and then she'd meet me 10 kilometers up the road and I'd catch up. She'd check I was okay. I had a two-way radio as well with her. And then we literally sort of frog jumped like that the entire way. And as our Facebook page kind of spread through and got more and more followers, we'd actually have people waving to us who'd followed us a bit on the Facebook page. Or if we'd stop, because I'd often set off and cycle for 30 kilometers, then we'd stop and have breakfast. And then at that point, people would stop and just check we're okay. And yeah, some phenomenal things happened that I just couldn't explain. I couldn't have scripted some of the things that happened and conversations we had. It was just amazing.
It just flowed along and did things nicely and in a way that made it a joy by the sound of things.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one part of it. Once we'd come back from Eucla, we stopped in Norseman on the way out and on the way back, and had a day there. And the caravan park there were just so gracious, and yeah, just really encouraging. And even the IGA in Norseman, they did a collection for us. Once they knew what the story was, they did a collection for us, and they got on board. It was just like amazing how many people just backed us really. But from Norseman, we went through to Hayden on that middle road, on the Hayden Road. And of course, if anybody's travelled that, they'll know it's pretty much gravel all the way. And we'd had rain. And so we set off and it was pretty dry when we set off. So we thought that's fine. The road was open. We didn't know it, but we just got on it and they closed the road, but we were already on it. We had no access to that kind of information. So we were stuck on there, and it's red dirt on that road. So by the time we got to the first camping place, I was caked in mud. In fact, maybe a picture I'll send you is just of that. And of course, at these bush campsites, there's no showers. So Susan's driving and thinking, I can't let her in the van. She's so filthy. What are we going to do? How are we going to shower? How are we going to get it clean? So she's concerned about this, unbeknown to me. Even when we stopped for breakfast, she made me sit on the step with a bin liner. I wasn't allowed in the van. But when we got to the campsite at the end of that day's journey, there was an American couple who actually live in Busselton who rocked up, and they're backing in, and he's doing the driving and his wife's out there just guiding him in. And I'm busy just doing the maintenance thing that I do every day did every day on my bike. And this American voice hollers over, "Here, are you that woman from Busselton?" Yes, I probably am. They had a gas-fired shower in their caravan, and they gifted me the use of that. And then we enjoyed a glass of wine and some nibbles with them afterwards. So Susan's fears were completely unnecessary. But that's that whole thing about when things are right, they just flow. Things just happen. Yeah. So that was beautiful.
Things show up and you've got absolutely no idea where they're coming from.
No,
And it
yeah,
doesn't matter.
doesn't
They're
matter.
there when it's needed.
Exactly right.
Oh,
Yeah, and
fantastic.
even on that road, we'd be cycling and we were the only ones on there, and all of a sudden this car would come up, and this couple, they're two guys, and they were involved in the oh my goodness, I can't remember what it's called. It's kind of a vintage car rally. It's not vintage car, but it's an old rally, sort of I think it was pre 1940s or something. But it's the India Pacific run. So they started in Perth and they were going back over east. And they were trying to get there because they were part of the organising for the start of the race, but they cut through on the Hayden Road. And this head comes out the window and this guy goes, hold your hand out like you're in a relay race. So I'm trying to climb up a hill. So I've got both hands on the bar thinking, I'm never going to make it. Hand goes out and suddenly there's a $50 note in my hand. And they've stopped at the brow of the hill and they're egging me on and egging me on. And I get there and there's a $50 note in my hand. And they'd stopped and seen Susan way back, quite a few kilometres behind me. She was just waiting to give me time to get to the 10 kilometres. And of course, they'd spoken to her. So they knew what it was all about. You know, just really fun, crazy things like that would happen frequently on the trip. It was great. Yeah, I was like, I was
Yeah,
in a bubble.
absolutely amazing to hear that. So much more than you expect.
Hmm. Yeah.
Karen, what does it take you to do an adventure ride like this, to ride from Busselton to Eucla and back?
So, yeah, what does it take? I guess an element of craziness. But I think probably throughout my life, I mean, even sort of experiences growing up, I grew up in a time where divorced parents were not the thing. And so I was obviously brought up by my mum predominantly. With my brother and sister, we were on welfare, that was frowned upon. So I was always on the edge of things, you know, always kind of labelled and marginalised to a point, not overtly, but it was there at school and things like that. And then when I was a teacher for 20 years, and I often was teacher to kids that were labelled behaviour problems, whatever. So very aware that labelling is a powerful thing. And whilst I know it serves a purpose, I actually push it against it because it pigeonholes people. And then with my own cancer journey and the decisions I made in terms of the pathway I was going to take for healing, that marginalised me from the medical system and what was available there. And then my work post teaching, I became a health coach. So firstly in nutrition and then in precision health. And so I work predominantly with cancer patients. So again, I see the challenges and difficulties that they have. So I've always wanted to bring awareness to people. And I guess that's where my education background comes in as well. It's a beautiful forum or mechanism, really, to be able to have conversations that have a bit of depth and meaning. And so the with Nina and the Charlie Teo connection and just the unjustness that we could see in the way his story was portrayed, I just wanted to be able to offer people another lens by which to have an understanding of the work of the man and the impact he has on so many patients around Australia. And I guess also anybody working in those kind of fields, neurology, cardiology, any of those critical acute medical ways are going to have stories that haven't had the outcome they would want, you know. It's the very nature of the beast in terms of the area of work they're willing to work in, you know. So it's about trying to bring understanding and a more balanced view about life, I guess. And so I just saw the bike ride as a way of doing that. So the resilience kicks in and the determination kicks in. And I guess probably they're probably the main things. And I enjoy communicating with people, you know, I enjoy listening to people. And that's partly my role as a coach, is to listen to where people are at. And I have to say, like on the journey, there were people that I ended up speaking to that I probably would never naturally gravitate to. Guys with big beards and in leather jackets on really old bikes, and you know, and just the fascinating connections we have because we're on the same road, you know, and that's the opening to having a conversation. Yeah, what else? What I guess also having a family that just go with it, just allow me to do these things, and friends who get behind me. So I'm just really fortunate, I think, that those things that allow you to be stronger and allow you to face challenges are there because I have a buffer underneath me.
So you've got that background, but you've also experienced things on the way through that you recognise when there are things like labels you mentioned, and also other situations that can often sideline people, but you've seen them and you're aware of them, so you're able to actually navigate through.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a Western society in particular, we're so conditioned by, oh, is this going to be controversial? But the written evidence, like solid lab-based evidence, and anything anecdotal is not really considered. And yet, when you come to do science and research and study, often it's something like that that's triggered a thought and a desire to prove or disprove something. And because of my health coaching and my own story, and so the community that I kind of am privy to, if you like, these anecdotal stories aren't just one-offs that sit in isolation. There's a number of them that actually warrant. And Nina, my girlfriend, is an example of that. She's living well with brain cancer. And although she's got limitations because of the surgery, she still has purpose and joy in her life. And hers is a story that, when you look at the medical statistics, shouldn't be happening. Mine is a story, when you look at the medical statistics, shouldn't have happened. But it has, and it's real, and it's truth, because I'm living proof. Nina's living proof. And so I guess wherever I can see an opportunity just to challenge that, not in a divisive way, but just to raise curiosity, raise conversation, raise questions, I grab it.
Yeah, it's really important that you trust what you see. And when you see something, don't be convinced by somebody else who says, no, that's not the case. You're actually seeing it. That's a point of reality that you see. And 2023, the last election cycle for local governments, in our shire, one of the candidates said, I only make evidence-based decisions. And I thought, I can't support that. I'm really not a supporter, because I know that documented evidence, if someone's documented the evidence, then they've only documented a part of the story that matters. They haven't done everything, because the process of documenting it makes them limit down to a specific slice of reality, and they have to control for all these other variables. But the situation they're dealing with has to include all those other variables.
Yeah, I've got a beautiful friend who is a PhD researcher at one of the Perth universities. And I can remember her saying to me once, there is no research that is absolutely objective, because everybody comes to research with a slight bias. And so that's why that happens. And we all do. Whatever we do, we bring our own biases and experiences and things to whatever whatever situation we find ourselves in. And it's only if we become conscious of that we can try our damnedest to be as objective as possible. We're never going to be fully objective, but it's just human nature.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You've got to not only know what people have actually studied, but you've also got to deal with what you can see in front of you as well.
That's right. Yeah. And that's why, like you say, each of us bring so many variables.
Yes, every situation brings so many variables, not just like every individual does, but as well. Yeah, it's just you can't put it down to a piece of paper and just go, boom, that's it. There's some sort of judgment
Yeah.
put in there as well.
At best for me, research is a very strong guideline. It gives you some information, but not the complete picture.
Yes, that would be a fair way to put it. We've heard now what it takes, Karen, to have done this amazing adventurous ride. Let's have a break now, and after the break, we'll have a talk about what it means. We've heard what it takes, Karen, to ride from Busselton to Eucla and back. Now, let's have a look at what it means. Karen, what does it mean to you, your family, or the community that you're able to ride from Busselton to Eucla and back?
I think one of the thoughts that kept going through my mind on the ride was like the road system we have here are like the veins in our body. You know, they connect so many different communities together. So just even the ride in itself and connecting communities and just talking about what had happened in a previous community we cycled through or experiences we'd had was huge. But I guess it also highlights that there are ways we can overcome any challenges. You know, like I went to the extreme because that I tend to jump in 2 feet with everything. So I'm somebody who goes hardcore, if you like. But we can all rise above challenges, particularly if we have the support around us. And that's where the community comes in, really. You know, they get joy out of it. Like the setting off, we had the mayor of the time, Grant Henley, of the Busselton City Council there to cut the ribbon with Nina, and he helped Nina cut the ribbon. But just the camaraderie and joy, and you know, 2 little girls wanted to come and do a talk, and they actually had written something for me before I set off. You know, completely unscripted, but they just did it. So people really got on board, and I think community. I think what it highlighted for me is just how powerful community is. And when we create mechanisms to divide community, it's not helpful. But if we can find ways to unite community, that says a lot. It's huge, you know, because people rub shoulders with people they may not have done. I mean, I found that on the bike ride, but it also kept me forward thinking. And particularly because of my diagnosis, to be able to forward think, forward plan is a really powerful tool to use. And I know for Nina, for example, you know, she was hanging out once we'd set off on the bike ride, she was hanging out for me coming back because she was involved in that, you know, and she was a massive part of that. That's why people were gathering. And we still reminisce about those experiences. I guess for my family, what does it mean? It probably exasperates them often when I do things like this. But what it did for me was it really showed how supportive my family are. My 2 girls organised or helped me organise a big function once I'd got back. They were all over Facebook for me. You know, they were my biggest cheerleaders, really. My husband was quietly in the background. He's not someone who's in the limelight at all. He's not comfortable in that space, but he was there in the background for me, even to the point I'd actually forgotten some key things when I set off from Busselton. And our first port of call was just down from Rosa Glen. And I had to phone him that day and say, we've just got to our campsite. Could you bring along? And so he had to drive all the way to, thank God it was the first stop of the journey and back, you know, but he didn't bat an eyelid. Yeah, I guess that's it really. It's about community and communication and just sharing things with people.
It's amazing, and people respond to that. And you talked about how bringing people together versus being divisive. So what you did was actually allowed people to bring themselves together.
Yeah, they really did. And I think with a lot of the work I do and the other organizations I'm involved in and things, that's the key thing. It's about bringing people together because there is so much wisdom and so much support within a group. You know, we don't have to keep reinventing the wheels and all the rest of it. As human beings, we just need to know that we're seen, we're heard, and we're held. We're part of something. And that's what the ride did, really. You know, I was the mechanism, if you like, but it actually meant everybody was part of it, or could be if they chose to be.
It's a beautiful thing to see it happening.
Yeah.
You saw a number of people along the road and they were hearing about what you were doing from all different angles. How did they experience community? Like you talk about the guys who said, hold your hand out as
Mm.
you're riding along the hill. How did they experience the community impact?
I think for them, because they were about to embark on another endeavour of their own and be part of this big rally across Australia, they appreciated the effort that it took for me and Susan to embark on the ride. And then consequently, in conversation, we learnt about their endeavour. And so it was the same, so that it was reciprocated, in many ways, cheering them on, following them on Facebook, just being part of that, even if it was just a one-day encounter. On the ride, when we got to Norseman on the way out to Eucla, there was a family that had left Dunsborough and they were cycling, oh my goodness, I think it was to Melbourne, and it was all to do with mental health. And one of the sons had lost a close friend to suicide, and that was his inspiration for actually doing the ride. And then his family came on board, and so that it was his stepfather and his brother who were actually doing the ride, and then the mum and the sister were there doing all the support en route. And we kept running into each other for a couple of days, which was just incredible. And so we were able to encourage them, they were able to encourage us. Got a great photo of all of us together on the ride. But just those encounters and just the willingness of the human spirit, I guess, to take on these things, just to highlight where we as a society or as a community can be supportive of groups that were really struggling, or support organisations that provide the services in our communities to help those that struggle. We can all play our part in small ways, large ways, whichever way our own personal experiences dictate that we can do. I just think that was one of the key things that came to me. I came across a number of people on their own journey across the Nullarbor for their own reasons. One chap, we were standing waiting for our toasted sandwiches at one of the roadhouses, and Susan had got the table. I was waiting to pick up my order, and this elderly gentleman was standing there. He was very quiet. I was there in my lycra, which may not have been a pretty sight. But there were also a whole load of bikies that were there they were using, I think it was pre-1948 bikes on their bike ride. There were 80 of them altogether. They were raising funds for the Flying Doctors. And so there was this, you can imagine this scene, like such an array of people. Some of those in leathers were professionals, some were genuine bikies, but loving their bikes. That was the common thing that they had. Some of them were in pristine condition. Some of them, I'm not sure they even made the complete trip. But this guy was standing there, and we got talking, and he was on a road trip for the first time without his wife. He'd lost his wife 6 months before to cancer. So he empathized or could see a connection in what I was doing. And we just got talking, and he came and sat with us and joined us for lunch. And we just got talking about the wildflowers that we were seeing, because it was the time of year, sort of October, beginning of November, where the wildflowers were out. And that's what he was doing. That was his way of connecting with his wife. But also it was the first time he'd been away without her. So that was a massive emotional challenge for him, but I would never have ordinarily probably spoken to him, but we just connected. And hopefully in some ways, I hope we affirmed his journey and what he was doing, because it was courageous for him to do that on his own.
So there's a lot of reciprocity there, that you're doing something that's giving, and they're doing something and you're receiving from that as well.
Absolutely.
That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
We've heard a lot of good things about the meaning of Karen being able to ride from Busselton to Eucla and back. We'll have a break now, and after the break, we'll have a look at how you do it. We've had a look at a lot of the positive meaning that it has, that Karen was able to cycle from Busselton to Eucla and back. Now, let's have a look at how you do it. Karen, if someone wanted to take on a massive challenge like a long-distance cycle like you did, how would they do that?
There's a lot of logistics involved. Now, you could either do that as a group, and there are groups that do endeavours like that, not necessarily across the country, but certainly from Albany to Perth. So you could get on board with like a charity organisation and do it for a purpose that way. And you've got all the logistics then set up for you. If you do it completely on your own, like I did, you need to pull that support together. So Susan was key for me, and she helped me logistically organise it, know exactly what our journey was going to be, make sure we had the communication between us, but also with our family and friends back home, if anything happened, contact all the main agencies that we needed to, like main roads, let them know that we're actually doing this endeavour. They were very sceptical initially. But the equipment was key for me. I had a mirror on my bike that I'd attached. And so I could see trucks, heavy vehicles, other vehicles coming up behind me. I could then make a decision to just get onto the hard shoulder before coming back onto the road. So safety was key. Two-way radio. There's all those logistical things. We planned our destinations ahead of time, so that we knew where we were going to be. Our biggest blunder was not appreciating we'd be on the Nullarbor crossing the air highway for 2 weeks. And so water is an issue. So having enough water in the van, we actually on the homeward journey ran out, and the roadhouses didn't necessarily have the capacity to give you water. And another angel that came across us, parked at the side of the road, having breakfast, being very mindful, for example, of that capacity to run out of water before we got to Norseman. And they were on their way home to Australand, your neck of the woods. They actually live in Australand, this couple. And they donated 21 litres of water. It might have been even more, but it was enough to get us to Norseman because they knew they were going to be home very soon. They didn't need that capacity. So that was a blunder we made, but to be aware of all of those things is key. Even food sources, how going across the Nullarbor, we could carry so much, but not everything. So how are we going to get it to us? So we arranged with the IGA in Norseman to ferry it out to Eucla. So when they did their drop-off at Eucla, we were included in the drop-off point.
I didn't even know you could do that.
Yeah, you can. There you go. And we actually, I think from memory, we actually included some wine and some nice cheeses and biscuits to celebrate that we got halfway.
Perfect.
Yeah, so you've just got to be really mindful of what the journey actually is going to need from you in terms of planning. And then the training. I did have an exercise physiologist help me, particularly with the recovery after each day and what I needed to be aware of for that. Thankfully for me, I had a nurse on hand. So that was useful. Not that I actually I did come off the bike twice and skinned my knees badly in the first 3 days. But it's all part of the story.
Cycling is one of those, you think you're going to be up there all the time, but that's not the case.
No.
There'll be
definitely.
something.
Yeah. And usually you come off in front of a whole group of people who observe it, which is what happened to me. But they all rallied around me. It was great.
A friendly crowd by the sound of it.
Yeah, I think I was the entertainment for their day.
Wonderful. It's a real logistical mix that you have to put together. You're away for like 6 weeks, is that right?
Yeah.
So just factoring in where you're going to be sleeping, your food, where you're going to top up with your food along the way. There's a lot to it.
Yeah, there is. And I guess on a personal level, you've got to be willing to say, I can't go any further today. I mean, I had days and days of cycling in the rain. And on one day, we did cut that day's trip short because it was just too dangerous. I couldn't see the potholes in the road because of puddles. So the potential for disaster was there. So we made that call just to pull back on that day. And there's part of me, like the stubborn part of me, that would have wanted to cycle through, but I had to pull back on that stubbornness and be realistic. Having a very level-headed sidekick in Susan helped for sure, but you have to know yourself a little bit and know what your boundaries are really and what your capacity is for sure.
And also plan to have a little up your sleeve.
Yeah, which is where for us, we actually planned in a day a week respite and we completely chilled. We did a bit of sightseeing, we went to the pub, so we really did take a day out, and that was important for recovery.
Absolutely. But then also, if you need to achieve 100 kilometres a day, then having even an extra day up your sleeve where, you weren't able to complete that distance for any reason.
Yeah, exactly. It gave us a buffer. And also what I found fascinating really was how quickly our bodies kicked into the circadian rhythm, the light dark, so we'd go to bed quite early. As soon as it got dark, we'd actually go with the daylight hours, which meant we were awake and refreshed in the morning, ready to set off at 7 a.m. or sometimes 6:30 a.m. And we felt amazing because of it.
Nature's an amazing thing, and just to not have nature contorted by electricity
Yep.
is a great thing.
Yeah. And there's so many metaphors that happen on the road. I can remember cycling from Alexandra Bridge through to Pemberton. And anyone who's done that road knows that the trees come right up to the road edge. So any buffer for a cyclist when a caravan comes past or a truck, there's very little room for maneuverability there. And when I first got on that road, I remember the tension in my body and just gripping the handlebars, trying to stay focused on the white line at the side of the road. And it wasn't till I relaxed and actually moved in and out according to the traffic, even though there wasn't much of a buffer, that I realized I was safer being more relaxed than tense and really focused. And that can be a metaphor in life. What you put your focus on really does take dominance. But when you relax out, so much more can come to you. It can stifle you when you're too rigid. I'm glad I learned that early on in the piece for the ride.
Yeah, I can imagine. Even being out, although it's a fairly decent sized highway and has a respectable shoulder on it, that run out from Norseman out to the border,
Mm.
the trucks are big and long,
Yeah. Yep.
and they push a lot of wind around on their own.
Yep.
And you're not that far away, really. So you go, okay, you think that seems to be the most risky area. But then when you've got no room to move on the Alexander Bridge Road,
Mm.
that's got every bit of the same danger to it, really.
Yeah, and prior to me going off on the ride, the biggest concern that people expressed to me was the trucks, and the road trains. And I can honestly say I only had hundreds on that journey, hundreds of trucks would have passed me, some of them in convoy using each other's slip to kind of preserve fuel. So sometimes there were two or three trucks together, literally in succession. But I only had one encounter with one truck. I don't know if I'm allowed to say he was an absolute jerk, but he was. Of all the trucks, everybody else was really courteous, really considerate. I didn't have any problem apart from this one truckie. And that was an early morning. It was probably about 7 o'clock in the morning, just after 7. So maybe he was just tired. I don't know. And the other thing, yeah, because the shoulders on that road are actually very good. Generally, they're very good. There's a couple of gravelly bits, but I had a gravel bike, so I felt safe on the road. But the rubbish, when you're so close to nature, because it's just you on a bike, you see the rubbish that's just thrown out of car windows along there, and that was really disappointing. The whole of that highway is strewn with it.
Yeah, sad to hear that, really, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
I guess if you stop at any of those roadhouses, they're all about 120-ish kilometres apart or something.
yeah.
And then I guess if you've bought something, it takes you like 5, 10 to eat it, and that's what there'll be a whole mass of rubbish at about that far out. When
Yeah, but I would say there's no excuse because there are lots of pull-ins for vehicles to stop and rest, and every single one of them had rubbish bins available, and they're serviced frequently. So it's just laziness that
it
people just
is,
chuck stuff out of the window and just don't hold on to it till the next stop. But anyway, that was disappointing. But I have to say, the truckies and the road trains, they were, yeah, If I was to embark on a trip like that again, I would have no concern about them at all.
That's great to hear. Absolutely. So is there a something next for you, Karen?
Oh, look, I'd love to do another big cycle ride. And in the back of my mind, I've got fermenting a cycle ride around Australia, but that is going to be like a 3-month trip. So it might have to wait until I fully retire and can do that. But next year, Susan and I are doing the Camino. So we're actually starting in France and ending up in San Diego. So that will be a 30-day walk, not for anything in particular other than ourselves. So, but that's my next challenge. And I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, that's amazing. Alison came on the podcast and talked about doing the Camino Trail,
Yep.
and she found it was an amazing journey to do as well. That'd be fantastic to look forward to.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And I have heard that so many people who have done it have had incredible experiences personally. So that's my next thing.
Yes, another big one. Thank you very much, Karen, for being on Forest.chat. It's been wonderful having you on the show. And all Forest.chat listeners wish you all the best with your next endeavour.
Thank you. And thanks for, just listening to my story.
It's a pleasure. It's great to hear of people doing good things.
There's many of us.
You've been listening to Forest.chat, where we talk about individual endeavour in Western Australia, what it takes, what it means, and how you do it. I'm your host, Paul Vandermeer, and in today's episode, we talked with Karen Crutchlow about cycling from Busselton to Eucla and back. Remember, there are 4 ways to get involved with Forest.chat. Share the domain Forest.chat with your friends and family and people you meet. When you sign up for the emails, you'll get advance notice of the episodes. If you want to listen to the episodes, go to forest.chat/episodes. If you want to support a small business, go to forest.chat/advert. I'm looking forward to joining you with our next guest. Until then, enjoy making it happen.